He also is part of the Prime Minister's Blue Economy Committee, and sir has been our mentor for a long time. Thank you so much, sir, for being here. Amitabh Sinha ji is deputy editor of Indian Express. He takes a lot of interest in environment and sustainability, and we are very grateful, sir, you have found time to join us today, and we look forward to your comments. We also have Aditya Kumar Sinha ji from, he's the executive director of CDAG Mumbai Center, which looks at maritime. So we are extremely grateful, Aditya ji, for joining us, and we look forward to your comments. Captain YP Sharma, my very old friend from the Navy, has joined us. Today, he represents a very important think tank, probably the oldest think tank in India, the United Services Institute from Delhi. And we are very grateful, Captain YP Sharma, for joining us, and we look forward to your comments. I want to make special mention. Thank you. I want to make special mention of our guest from Tokyo. Dr. Jain is joining us from Yokosuka Council for Asia Pacific Studies, and also her colleague, Dr. Elif, from YCAPS. And we are also awaiting one more our guest from YCAPS who will be joining us sooner. I'll hand it over to Nishtha to start the proceedings.
Right. So, good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Maritime Research Center, I extend a very warm welcome to all our distinguished experts, colleagues, mentors, interns, students, and guests who joined us today for the webinar titled Final Internship Presentations by our UDA summer interns from St. Stephen's College. Today marks a particularly important milestone for our internship cohort as we bring their internship journey to its culmination through the presentation of their research and insights developed during the course of their program. Our liberal arts internship program has encouraged students to look at UDA not merely as a maritime concept, but as a framework that can inform contemporary policy and strategic thinking. Today's presentation is going to reflect on the same approach. We are particularly privileged to have with us an eminent panel of experts representing academia, diplomacy, strategic affairs, international cooperation, technology, media, and public policy. Their perspectives are, we are hoping are going to provide our interns with an opportunity to take their research beyond the classroom and engage with practitioners and thought leaders working on the issues in the real world. So moving on, it is my privilege to invite the founder and director of the Maritime Research Center, Dr. Commander Arnab Das, to deliver the welcome remarks and formally inaugurate today's workshop. A little bit brief about Commander Das. He is an educator, innovator, entrepreneur, strategist, and researcher, and a former naval officer with over 2 decades of active services. He holds a master's and PhD from IIT Delhi and has spent close to 7 years there managing research projects for the Indian Navy and the DRDO. He founded a technology-driven think tank we today call as the Maritime Research Center, and a startup called the Nirdhwani Technology Private Limited, which we call as a sister company to MRC. He has also been a visiting professor at the Defense Institute of Advanced Technology in Pune. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nishtha. I'll use a quick presentation. This is the UDA framework which we have been working on and we are trying to populate. As Nishtha brought out, this year we had 36 interns from the top institutes, all the top 5 IITs, BITS Pilani, and also St. Stephen's. Today's presentation is close to my heart because we have liberal arts students also working with us, and it makes us truly multidisciplinary. And what you see here is the projects done by our interns populate this UDA framework, and we try to build this whole UDA framework across policy intervention, technology intervention, and capacity and capability building. Today, because we have less number of interns, so we are also taking this opportunity to present the work done by our research fellows, including our Deputy Director, Sridhar, Research Head, Catherine, Publication Head, Calistine, and Communication Head, Nishtha. so that, and we have such an eminent panel, I thought it will be very important to present the diversity of work that we do. So it also includes technology to some extent. And what we have done, I mean, I was still in a dilemma whether the sequence of presentation is right or not, but we still thought this is the best way, because the modeling and simulation driven MSP is the core contribution that we are doing for real world problem solving. So it will be done by two of our one intern and our deputy director, Sridhar, which will give you a sense of the actual groundwork that we have done. Then it will be followed by our research fellow, Calistine and Ekta, who's our intern. They will talk about how UDA contributes to the larger global order, and also how UDA framework has evolved over the last 100 years plus. And then we also are looking at two economic students, and also our research head, Catherine, bringing the economic blue accounting framework, which will be built on the modeling and simulation driven MSP. And then we also have Nishtha, who will be talking about the 100 Warriors initiative that we have kind of put together. So I think I will stop here and allow our interns and research fellows to talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for providing a context and inspiring everyone with the vision that MRC carries to the world on the UDA framework. We now move to our first presentation. Our first speaker is Vaibhav Sachin, who is an MRC intern and a student from St. Stephen's College. So over to you, Vaibhav.
Hi, everyone. I'll be sharing my slide in a second, but just to quickly introduce what my presentation is going to be about. I'm going to be presenting on something called the modeling and simulation driven marine spatial planning. All right. I hope I'm clearly visible and audible and the slides are visible.
Yes.
All right. So I want to draw your attention to the fact that the Indian Ocean is very, very prone to a lot of changing environment. So you think of the various ocean currents that operate over there. You think of the various winds that are operating over there. So you have the southwest monsoon winds, for instance. Or, for example, you have the trade winds that are operating, the different cyclones that emerge, particularly in the Bay of Bengal, the various human activities that take place, because it is strategically very important in terms of both trade and geopolitical power, because it connects to very major oceanic water bodies and also across various continents. So there's a lot going on in the Indian Ocean. At that point of time, it's very important to sort of trace what is happening and also to predict what the future will look like when these different variables, they are changing. Now, marine spatial planning comes into picture over here, wherein we just essentially plot the various human and non-human activities, which are very dynamic in nature. Except that the problem is that the traditional MSP, where we are largely plotting all of this, it remains very descriptive, it remains very governance oriented. And the problem, and which I'll also be talking about in the coming minutes, is that since it relies so heavily on historic data, it relies so heavily on static data, it is not really able to perform the functions that we really need to do when it comes to the Indian Ocean. The reason for this is that the place of origin for marine spatial planning has largely been the Western waters and the Western countries. Therefore, the way in which the algorithm reacts to the water over there, the way in which the systems that we generate and the solutions that we generate are only tailored to the Western waters. How do we then fit it in the Indian Ocean waters? How do we then fit for the exclusive economic zone of India, for that matter? Therefore, my argument largely is that the architecture of marine spatial planning not very suited to India's monsoon-driven variability, number one. Number two, we don't really have one common authority for everything. So there is a ministry level data fragmentation. There is a different ministry that is handling transport. There's a different ministry that is handling the weather forecasting, a different ministry for, let's say, fishery, so on and so, a different ministry for defense, so on and so forth. So there's an absence of a unified MSP authority, and therefore we need to resort to something called the modeling and simulation based marine spatial planning. Okay. What really are the various complexities that the Indian Ocean region faces? So I've talked about the highly variable oceanographic and atmospheric variability. Winds, they change their directions according to the seasons. Even the winds, they are not unidirectional because of the peninsular shape of the Indian coastal plains. So the southwest monsoon winds that are coming, they also diverge in sort of two ways. One goes to the Arabian Sea, one goes to the Bay of Bengal, so on and so forth. There's a lot of complex geopolitical and maritime activity taking place because you're connecting Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, Mediterranean Sea through the Strait of Hormuz, for instance. You're connecting Africa, you're connecting Australia, you're connecting the Southeast Asian countries. So there's a lot going on over here. You have different blocks. For instance, right, the major powers are also there. So a lot of geopolitical importance is also placed in the Indian Ocean region. Multiple phenomena, weather phenomena, and even non-weather phenomena, for instance. So you have the Indian Ocean dipole, which is sort of operating over there. I talked of the Strait of Hormuz. There's also the Strait of Malacca, which falls over there. You have the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, which also sort of falls in this particular region. So the Suez Canal is also somewhere or the other connected with the Indian Ocean. So when you have such very, very important linkages, when you have such very, very important trade and political power channels operating over here, it's very important that we do not rely on data which is collected at a particular point of time, which marine spatial planning, at least the one that originates in the Western premises that I talked about, does. Now, so I've spoken about the problem, and I also want to draw your attention to the fact that almost every literature that exists on marine spatial planning right now. So if you talk of the entire 10-step guide that Ehler and Dover talk about, I think this is one of my favorite papers I came across while researching on this. They have a very, very elaborate 10-step procedure, a 10-step guide as to how marine spatial planning is to be done. But again, all of it just boils down to one problem, that it is entirely operating on data which was collected once upon a time, and it is entirely operating on data which is very static in nature. It occurs at a point of time. But the problem is that you can't really work with that in the Indian Ocean, because you see the winds are always changing. So if, for instance, the winds are at place A and you record that data, and the very next second the wind changed their place and they go to place B, what do you do? What do you do with the data that you collected in place A? You can't really do anything about it. You can't really do much with it. Worse, you can't even forecast anything with it. You can't predict anything with it. I'll give you a very simple example. So you see how a lot of tropical cyclones work, especially the ones emerging in the Bay of Bengal region. And in the recent years, we have seen that there are a lot of tropical cyclones also emerging in the Arabian Sea due to the climatic factors and the climatic changes that are taking place. If you are always working with data that you collected 20 years back or 10 years back, you would not really be able to see the pattern in which these, for instance, cyclones are moving, and therefore not take proper preventive measures. Or you would not be able to trace why and where and how these many cyclones are emerging out of nowhere from the Arabian Sea, which theoretically they shouldn't be rather emerging as much as they do from the Bay of Bengal. So I just want to quickly categorically list the interventions to you, the problems. One, as I've talked about, these conventional plans, they are built from static spatial data sets. Secondly, traditional MSP can only identify existing conflicts among marine users, but there is little to no tool available for forecasting long-term consequences. So you think of disaster management, you have to really forecast what is going to happen in the future to be able to manage it properly. Many sectors are typically analyzed independently despite the interconnected nature. So for instance, if I talk of fisheries, fisheries are dependent upon the climatic factors. They're dependent upon how well there is safety and security in the region. They're also dependent upon the coral reefs. They're also dependent upon climate change. So all of these factors are very interconnected in nature, which MNS MSP focuses on, as opposed to traditional MSP, which only focuses on static and independent data. And lastly, we don't really have expert judgment and expertly trained professionals for this. These are a few examples because I want to really emphasize that this is not very theoretical in nature. We've seen this happening in Tamil Nadu. We've seen this happening in Kerala, where there has been a lot of wastage of time, energy, potential, financial resources, human power, etc., because we did not really see what it would look like in the future, what certain variables, how certain variables will pan out in the future. Therefore, we resort to something which we call modeling and simulation based MSP, where we take all these variables in a very controlled laboratory setup. We run them through these 5 sort of channels in order to have a very complex and comprehensive and a very engaging sort of and a very feedback oriented plan ready in order to manage the various variables that are taking place in the water bodies. And these are the multiple sectors wherein we can implement them: fisheries, shipping, hydrocarbon, coastal marine tourism, disaster risk management, so on and so forth. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vaibhav. I now call Sridhar Prabhuraman, who's the Deputy Director at the Maritime Research Center, to take over. Sridhar will present his work on the marine spatial planning digital platforms.
Thank you so much, Nishta, and a very warm welcome to everyone. My name is Sridhar Prabhuraman, and on behalf of MRC and NDT, I'll be presenting to you the MSP tool that Vaibhav has been essentially talking about. Now, Vaibhav brings a good angle of why MSP is important, which essentially boils down to the fact that we have fragmented data. We have a lot of information that currently populates MSP is present from the static mapping, any information that we have collected. And also the planning, and we've seen multiple examples in growing economies where the consequences, any kind of actions that we take based on the planning essentially is reactive and not proactive in nature. That's more so because of the fact that either lack of information or the information that has come out to be too late. So the core idea behind MSP is to essentially have 2 concepts here. One is dynamism. So we essentially want to have a system which can continuously adapt to changing marine conditions. And the second thing being impact modeling, wherein if you can replay a particular event, for example, if we take Cyclone Amphan, or we take any other disaster. I mean, we spoke about this disaster management. If we take about any flood event that has been happening recently, and we want to replay the same thing 10 years down the line, how would that work? If there is an increase in the sedimentation in the river water, the same amount of water flow, how much amount of urban area is it going to impact now? How much amount of cropland area is it going to impact now? So that kind of impact modeling is what MSP essentially is what all about. So I'll avoid going through this flow again. So before we move into marine spatial planning, I wanted to quickly just showcase a tool to try to explain the concept of what we say when we say modeling and simulation based MSP. Now, it is supposed to be an individual single platform where essentially multiple layers come together, multiple agencies come together to propagate the data. They can both ingest as well as extract data through APIs. Now, one of the examples I'm showcasing here is the shipping related noise estimation. Now, all these small dots that we see is currently the shipping traffic that is flowing in the region. But we want to move away from the notion of just showcasing the shipping information because that data we already have. What we are representing is the noise that is being generated by shipping. So we're trying to extract some information from the data that we have. Now, the color coding that you see, the lighter colors essentially represent the ships having a lower amount of self-generated noise. This is noise that is coming from the propeller of the ship and not really at this point distributing within the ocean. It's just the noise that is generated by the ship. Now that essentially equates to the speed with which the ship is moving and the length of the ship and other such kind of factors like what kind of engines, how many number of engines are we talking about and all of those things. So there's an algorithm which essentially runs in the backend which identifies based upon these components what is the overall noise that is being generated by the ship in itself. But then there's a broader angle towards it. Now, when what we want to do is want to distribute this in terms of how does this impact the ocean as an environment. In which case now as a user, now, as a user, you can essentially select a particular region. You can identify that what is the date that you want to identify the noise for, select the frequency range that you're essentially interested in, the depth that you're interested in, and what it essentially produces is a shipping noise map. Now, this is more of a channel modeling concept where we not just identify the noise that is emitted from the ship, but also how that noise distributes across the ocean. And that depends upon other factors such as the environmental parameters, the temperature in the water, the salinity level of the water, and all those kind of things, which essentially dictate the speed of sound, at what speed the noise is going to move, and so on and so forth. Now, the way I basically showcased to you the shipping noise, so that's a broader tool, but this tool has been built to encompass 6 different layers: the underwater noise mapping, the coastal and riverine flood risk analysis, coral bleaching and risk forecasting, oil spill drift simulation, blue carbon ecosystem health, and marine biodiversity and habitat suitability model. Uh, the work that we present for MSP essentially is an accumulation of work that we have done over multiple years. So we have done a lot of work around sediment management, identifying the sediment classification in tropical waters. We have done some sediment classification for the Ujjaini Reservoir, and so on and so forth. Of course, shipping noise estimation has been my area of study for quite some time now, but that includes both noise and vibration analysis on board and off board marine platforms. We have some work on acoustic habitat mapping. Now, the beauty of MSP essentially lies in the fact that you can integrate multiple layers together. So that means that you can see new information that would otherwise be absent. So for example, with the shipping noise and with this work of acoustic habitat mapping. So in acoustic habitat mapping, we are identifying both the potential fishing zones as well as the acoustic habitat for marine mammals such as blue whales, dolphins, and sea turtles. And when I say identification, this is not again just based upon static data. It really identifies. So what we're trying to identify here is the food that these marine mammals essentially rely on, which essentially comes down to the chlorophyll content in the water, because that signifies where the food is more. So such kind of like starting from the ground up, starting from the actual data points and traveling from there to identify the migratory patterns of these marine mammals, not just based upon the snapshot that you receive, but rather based upon these environmental factors and environmental conditions. And when we overlap this kind of information on top of the shipping noise map that we saw earlier, this essentially showcases to us an information such as where these marine mammals migratory patterns exist, where the habitat exists, and in those habitats, what kind of noise do we see? And they are correlated in the sense that both marine mammals and ship essentially now make noise in the same frequency band. So it's the same low frequency range in which both of them overlap, which has caused a lot of distress to marine mammals and of course to our own underwater sensors as well. So to be able to identify and overlap that is what one of the main components of marine spatial planning is. Now, we've done some work on environmental impact and aquaculture, both identifying the urban flood mapping, coastal and riverine flood analysis. We've done some work around it. Dark ship detection, as well as vessel path prediction. So using SAR images, identifying where the ships are present, and then correlating that with what we get from satellite AIS data to essentially identify which of these vessels are currently missing in the satellite AIS data. Of course, underwater sea cables are important now more than ever. It is extremely important to identify what are the pain points, what are the regions where there is a threat to these underwater sea cables, and if we have to maintain it, then what are the different aspects we need to consider, like what kind of traffic is there in the region, and other elements that come towards it. So we've done a lot of work individually in each of these components, and MSP essentially brings all of these together. So talking about the 6 initiatives that I mentioned about, the first initiative essentially maps the full acoustic environment of the Indian Ocean. So this goes beyond just the shipping noise alone. We have also taken into consideration things like the rain-driven noise, the wind-driven noise, and so on. So now we basically model these natural sources and apply the propagation corrections that is required for that. So construct the sound speed profile and acoustic habitat, sound speed profile, as well as the acoustic channel model for the noise to essentially propagate. And we build the overall noise map. Now you'll see that each of the initiative essentially is represented in 3 different layers. The first layer essentially showcases what is the information that we are really dealing with, what we are trying to create. The second is the impact analysis, like what is it that we're generating out of it. So you can identify acoustic quiet zones, for example, where is a period of low noise or where there is a period of high noise region. And this is extremely important for any kind of sensor operation and recalibration format for that matter. Now we've done second layer essentially is on the coastal and riverine flood analysis. So there are 2 different distinct flooding mechanisms that we have. So rivers essentially overflowing from any kind of upstream upstream rainfall, and any kind of storm surge that is pushing the seawater inland during any cyclones and such kind of attributes. And when they coincide, which essentially they frequently do in the Ganga Brahmaputra Delta, the result is dramatically much more worse than either of them happening alone. So this compound flooding is essentially a dominant failure mode And so that is something that a traditional MSP does not capture. So what we essentially do is we individually have built the both riverine flood model and the storm surge module, which essentially takes into consideration the digital elevation and other factors we use less. So it performs basically hydrodynamic modeling, and then it performs a joint probability analysis on top of it. So what we can then see is that in 10 years down the line, 50 years down the line, as I mentioned, that if there is an increase in the sea level rise, then how would the same cyclone or the same flood scenario essentially work with an increase in sea level rise for that matter. Um, the third initiative essentially is on the coral bleaching. Now, we know that bleaching essentially occurs when the sea surface temperature exceeds a local maximum by around X amount of degrees. Now, but temperature alone is known to be over predicting the coral bleaching impact. I mean, because the corals have adapted to increase in temperature, just the way marine mammals have adapted to increase in the noise level, the corals have adapted to increase in temperature. So there are other stressors apart from the thermal stresses that come into mixture. So the acidification, turbidity, the nutrient loading, and all those kind of things come into picture. So what we essentially do is we identify a thermal refugia. So these are basically the reef zones that consistently stay cooler as compared to other in the neighborhood. So it allows us to identify that where our conservation initiatives should basically go forward towards, which are the coral reef regions where we should first conserve, and which we know for a fact that they're already part of the thermal refugia. The fourth initiative is in the oil spill drift as well as oil spill detection and drift simulation. So oil spills have been occurring for quite some time now. Approximately 40% of global seaborne oil trade essentially passes through the Indian Ocean basin. Now, the idea essentially is to first identify where an oil spill has occurred, and the second part is also to identify that X number of days later how that oil spill has drifted, because that completely depends upon factors such as the monsoon trajectory and other such kind of things. And as Vaibhav before me also mentioned that we have changing winds, everything keeps on changing. So we want something that can predict that with the respect to the changes in the environment. Let's say during the southwest monsoon in June, it will travel fundamentally different as compared to, let's say, how it will travel in December. So with the changing environment and changing condition, we want to understand how these oil spill will essentially travel, what kind of trajectory it will formulate. And we just spoke about coral bleaching. Now, this is oil spill is again one more component that attaches to coral bleaching, because we know that is it going to impact the existing coral reefs in the region or not. So that's what the fourth initiative is all about. Now, the fifth initiative is basically monitoring the blue carbon ecosystem, which is basically the mangrove, seagrass, and salt marshes that we have. Now, the Indian Ocean region again contains mostly 50% of the global's mangrove extent is basically present in the Indian Ocean region. But currently, the problem is that we have not even mapped this. So, our first priority with the blue carbon ecosystem health has been to map the presence of mangroves and salt marshes and seagrass in the region. But what this gives us is essentially a baseline. So we can perform carbon stock quantification analysis, kind of, we can track the emission factors that we have, all those things. And we also know that with any kind of extreme events, these mangroves and mangroves and seagrasses are the first line of defense that we have in the coastline to essentially tackle any kind of extreme events. The last initiative is that of marine biodiversity and habitat suitability. So we have mapped multiple species so far, that include sea turtle, fisheries, habitat, identifying the potential fishing zones. We've mapped blue whales, green turtles, and so on and so forth. But again, as I mentioned, the idea is not just to look at where these mammals have been visible in the past, but also to understand, because that is extreme. The data point for that collection is very small, because you are looking at a specific instance of time based upon when it was feasible for us to perform a collection of the data, and that we could identify the visibility of those marine mammals in the region. So going by that alone would not yield us the appropriate results, which is why we look at the food chain of the marine mammals to identify where these food chains exist, and based upon the food chain we also track the migratory patterns. So some of these outcomes that we have received, so this is for the acoustic habitat mapping, this is for the potential fishing zone, and so on and so forth. And as I mentioned, all of these, the key benefit of marine spatial planning is the fact that all of them come together and they talk to each other. So mangroves and flood risk obviously interconnected. Now we have underwater noise mapping, which essentially directly goes to the marine biodiversity and ecosystem health. Oil spill drift simulation that directly injects into the blue carbon ecosystem health, as well as the identifying the coral reef reaches, and so on and so forth. Coral reef bleaching and so on. So the one single initiative where all of these, a platform which essentially captures all the different angles, a platform which captures all the different data points and tries to bring it all together is what modeling and simulation MSP is all about. And the one of the main reasons why we need it, of course, apart from what Weber mentioned in terms of governance complexity and other aspects, is that growing economies cannot really perform a blanket deployment of sensors to identify these kind of data points. So what we essentially need to rely on is prediction, and that's something that is more and more feasible today with the advent of AI as compared to what it was 10 years ago. So I'll wrap my presentation up at that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sridhar, for that insightful presentation. Our next presentation takes us from the spatial dimension of UDA to, an area which is in terms of the broader international systems. I now invite Calistine Lewis, who is a research fellow and head of publications at MRC, to present his research on the UDA in global orders.
Hope I'm audible. I'll just share my screen.
Yes, you're audible, Calistine.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Calistine. I'm the head of publication and research fellow at MRC. So today I'm just going to present a short, it's called Building the Blue Sun, the Underwater Domain Awareness and its Place in an Evolving World Order. And what we're going to do today is just going to see less from the technical side of things, where apart from the science, as a political science graduate, how do we understand a system like the UDA framework in a world that is constantly shifting in today's session. So first of all, this is something that everyone is aware of, the ocean, but something that needs to be ground and as the foundation is that the ocean decides land on Earth. We often think of us with the terrestrial bias that all we do, because we can only inhabit terrestrial areas, that's where we sort of place our existence on. But we do not fully realize that a majority of the world's surface, the biodiversity, food security, climate, trade, technology, internet, finance, cultures, livelihoods, institutions, and ultimately statecraft, all of which compounds and makes together the world order that we have, is ultimately going to be and is already decided on the ocean floor. But we just can't see the ocean floor, and that's where UDA comes in. So I'm going to go through 5 dimensions of what this has, what UDA has implications for world order. Firstly, it's going to be about politics, economics, environment, demography, and technology. So firstly, to understand is that we often think of territory as a static terrestrial 2D space, which is what our maps about land does. But we should understand that fluid spaces don't work like that. Wet ontologies, terrestrial, all of them dissolve. And this sort of Westphalian bias that we have, because our entire world order is often situated on a political system that was generated in a landlocked European setting. So out of the blue, we already know that they did not anticipate how the world would work. So statecraft essentially as a concept of international relations, sovereignty, all rests on this assumption that all of the states are in cordial understanding of their territorial and terrestrial sort of biases. But then we understand that the dark blue in this represents the exclusive economic zone. But we understand that when it comes to water spaces, when it comes to oceans, this Westphalian-centric statecraft model really becomes very hard to navigate. And there's a lot of legal ambiguities that leave us. So that's where we have to understand and reconceptualize maritime sovereignty. We need to first understand the space in itself, the volumetric nature of how the underwater domain is. So that essentially is how subsurface geopolitics will be sort of debated and won in the 21st century when it comes to gray zone attacks, when it comes to protecting our submarine infrastructure, when it comes to fiber optic cables that this very meeting is done on, but we can't even see the ocean floor where the fiber optic cables lie. So anyone could go ahead and snip it with a tool, and then like Fiji would be blackout, a Pacific island nation would be locked out of the international internet. So that level of vulnerability policy should begin with us questioning the way we understand the world in itself. Secondly, when it comes to economics and the blue economy, this is something that resurfaces. All of this every single dot of color that you see is probably a freight ship that's traveling the oceans, the trade corridors that links us, the Amazon orders, the way that the EV revolution, the green revolution that we have is going to be based on the underwater world, when it's going to be our entire society's commercial backbones rests on the ocean floor. When it comes to subsurface infrastructure, we have energy pipelines that will soon be connecting these continents. We already have trade, 80% of trade going through, and what we need to do is we need to first see into these domain for that domain to be protected in the same thing. And then as we hurtle towards a decarbonized economy, a lot of these mineral resources that we will need rest at the bottom of the ocean floor. So how do we create a green economy? How do we navigate blue investment? How do we ensure that there's no spatial conflicts when we develop offshore energy, deep sea mining, shipping lanes, traditional fisheries? All of this shows that world order in itself, that individual states, that when they work together, we need to have this sort of understanding of how our economies, how our states, and how our institutions sort of interact with each other. I'm not going to the theoretical part of it, but when it comes to the third dimension, which is more of the environment, I'd like to think of the UDA as a blue MRI. So what does an MRI scanner do? It looks into the body, it analyzes, it diagnoses, and it tells us the health of a particular human or a living being. So I tend to think of the UDA itself, the Underwater Domain Awareness Framework that is built by the Maritime Research Center, as a diagnostic tool. Just earlier, Sridhar was talking about acoustic habitat mapping, or looking at different ways that we understand what biodiversity, biomass is present where. It's also a way of, from a world order perspective, where we have to understand that that things like environment are not just, environmentalists that will be at the corner of every meeting. No, we have to understand that ecological sustainability is critical, because without that, states themselves will not be able to continue. So we understand that securitization of the environment is an important aspect for world order to remain functional, to remain stable. So this means that we need to first know how our planet is doing. We need to know how warm the oceans are getting. We need to know what species are at the edge of extinction, who, if they're knocked off the food chain, then you have the entire chain tumble down. Every single brick of the ocean food chain will impact the entire ocean ecosystem, but also again land by extension. So we have to understand climate tipping points, to understand ocean governance, whatever environmental policy framework that we make, to ensure that it does apply when we bring countries together through international treaties, that they can know where those policies are applying. When it comes to marine protected areas, what are the areas that we are protecting? Where are the biodiversity that we have to understand? So all of this, I think UDA plays an important, crucial aspect to sort of concrete and make sure that it's there. So again, here, securitization theory, Earth system governance, we have to understand that security is no more just, what country possesses what arms. It's also about understanding that ecological collapse would mean that that particular country may not be able to build a resilient institution. So that's where UDA comes in from an environment perspective, to sort of diagnose how the ocean health is doing, how our biodiversity value chains are doing, how is our the entire ecosystem prevailing at a time when climate apocalypse is just a few centigrade, like temperature points away. So ultimately, then we have to understand that, yeah, wait. Sorry, it's just, yeah. The next thing is about, we have to understand that 4.15 billion people live within 100 miles of a coast. That's almost, and by 2050, 40% of the global population will be in the ocean, Indian Ocean rim by 2050. So this is going to be where the center of humanity lives. And that's important for world order, because what is world order without its people? So that brings us to the fourth dimension, which is demography. if we are to ensure stable populations with stable income generations, with stable employment capabilities that lead to institutions within stable democracies and an overall healthy job, well-earned, safe world order, we have to look at the oceans because one, the demography is surrounding the oceans, but two, there is insane human capital that exists within this periphery that we have to leverage because as we already know that our job markets are very terrestrial centric. Our engineering markets are often just inland. We don't really look at the ocean space as something more than just not just minerals to be taken out, but as spaces to interact with as sovereign spaces of themselves. So you see that there is going to be increasing labor demand if we do it the right way in renewable energy, in aquaculture, bioconservation, logistics, and the traditional coastal youth also have to be fed into this green blue sort of sector through the UDA, which allows us to combat things like youth discontent, illegal migration, maritime piracy, and those are very important to ensure that you have a stable political system. So ultimately, then you also see that ultimately technology is also something that we are increasingly ensuring within in the underwater space, whether it be energy, whether it be trade, logistics, surveillance, security, and so on. But technology has to be understood with its biases. That when this technology is mostly developed within the global north countries, you are not developing it for the unique conditions. Like the temperate waters are just a fraction of where the global population will live or where the majority of the world's oceans are. We need to understand the global south and tropical waters, which are noisier, which are louder, which are warmer, are so much more important to be diagnosed specifically. Otherwise, we're just reading the thermostat wrong, right? So we need to have a solution-driven architecture and we need to bridge this technological gap. Because ultimately, we have to understand that world power will be negotiated through the subsea space in the 21st century, and world order by measuring to ensure that stable countries are functioning in a healthy manner to have an international cooperative way of us to develop these blue resources, as well as ensure that sovereignty, terrestrial claims, and so on are functioning in a healthy way. We need to center UDA as a framework for that. UDA as a blue sun to ensure energy pipeline to illuminate our way. Because to be very honest, the majority of our oceans, just 20 meters under the oceans, remain blind to us. While we can see into the galaxy, we can't even see 300 meters down a dark ocean. And that's where we stand as a species and where we have to really question ourselves about what priorities are we really pursuing. And that's where I feel like UDA brings in an important part of world order in that sense. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Calistine. Continuing with international dimensions of UDA, our next presentations looks specifically at the global relevance of the UDA framework. I'm happy to invite Ekta Sareen, who's a UDA summer intern and a student at St. Stephen's College, to present her research on the global relevance of UDA.
So today I'll be presenting on the evolution and the status of the underwater domain.
Ekta, your screen is not visible yet. Your presentation is not up.
Is it visible now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So as we all know that Earth is 70% surrounded with the water, and yet much of it happens beneath everything. Much of it happens beneath the underwater surface. As a dependence on ocean continues to grow, and the understanding of underwater world has become very important nowadays. This is where the underwater domain awareness plays a very vital role. So before starting and discussing about the underwater domain, we will first know what is underwater domain. Underwater domain is ability to understand, monitor, and manage the activities that are happening beneath the ocean surface. It began around the Cold War region, and it was basically used for the military concept for the marine as well as underwater submarine detection. But it has evolved now with a very multidisciplinary framework way. It also has covered a lot of it, such as environmental problems, scientific researches, disaster management, and the blue economy. While has also played a very important role as it has started to contribute a lot to the blue economy as well. Unlike marine domain awareness, it has a very focused domain on UDA, as we know that it also contributes to the sustainability and the UN under sustainable goals. So we'll start. Okay. So there are pretty topical debates about it. There are major debates. So we'll start with the tropical versus the temperate details. Most of the sonar as well as the underwater system were designed for the temperate waters, as they're very less effective towards the tropical Indian Ocean due to the difference in the temperature, biodiversity, and the monsoon areas. Therefore, the region-specific technologies are needed there, as it only fits the whole temperate water system. So many of the authors such as Phyllis Steinberg and Kimberly Peters also wrote a lot about it, as in most of their writings about ocean, they typically said that oceans are different everywhere. So the solution should be according to the location specific areas. And also Rohan D'Souza in his 2006 novel also said that development should be considered according to the local ecological conditions and not just on the basis of whatever technology is building. In MRC Research Center as well has opted with the solution-oriented UDA framework by encouraging the Indian Ocean-specific researches in the niches acoustic models, AI, autonomous underwater vehicles, and the advanced underwater sensors. This approach has a lot improved with the maritime security, underwater monitoring, environmental protection, and the sustainable development of the blue economy. Then, what is the UDA approach for the product versus the solution? Having advanced technology is very important, but technology alone cannot just solve the underwater challenges. UDA is often seen as it uses for the sonar, sensor, drones, and the communication system. But these are only just the tools. Abhijit Singh, in his book, also argues that UDA is both a technology as well as a governance challenge. Christian Bugger also highlights that the importance of cooperation and the governance is protecting underwater infrastructures. Stuart Eldon also explains that oceans are three-dimensional spaces and that requires a very integrated management. In MRC, it combines technology, AI, scientific data, stakeholder participation to build the practical and sustainable solution, such as APY, as well, combining with the potential fishing zone mapping. We also know there is another debate about it, the strategic security versus the great public good. Today, as we know, underwater security is not only about protecting nation, but it is also about protecting the people and the environment. UDA has evolved from the maritime domain awareness, that is MDA, which mainly focused on naval operations and the defense. It now addresses a wider issue such as illegal fishing, marine pollution, climate change, and submarine cable protection. It also has talked about event 2611 that also highlight that how strong it is, how there is a very strong need for underwater security and protection of the critical infrastructures. Christian Bigger and Timothy Edmond also argues that maritime security requires cooperation between government, scientists, industries, and the local communities. Darshana Barua also Rajaram Nagappa emphasizes the strategic importance of underwater capabilities in the Indian Ocean. Maritime Research Center has also worked very hard for the UDA framework that integrates security, environmental protection, and scientific research as well as the blue economy. UDA also shows that protecting the ocean can also benefit both national security as well as the greater public good. Then the other debate is about traditional knowledge versus the modern science. So as we know, technology has become more efficient when it is supported by the experience of people who know the ocean best. As coastal communities provide a very valuable knowledge about illegal fishing, pollution, and the maritime ecosystem, effective UDA combines technology with the local knowledge as well as the scientific research. John Kurian and Martin Banwick emphasizes that traditional ecological knowledge supports sustainable fisheries and maritime conversations. Maritime Research Center has also promoted collaboration between the scientists, government, defense agencies, as well as the coastal communities. MRC Potential Fishing Zones PFZ mapping tool combines AI, satellite data, and the fisherman knowledge for the better resource management. UDA shows that traditional knowledge and modern technology work best together. Then the last debate about developed world versus the global south. Developed countries have advanced their underwater technologies, while the global south countries still face a very huge gap between them as well as the countries they live in. Abhijit Singh stresses that UDA needs skilled experts, researchers, as well as the institution and not just equipments. Khalili argues in her book that that control of maritime infrastructure reflect global inequalities, as well as Darshana Barua also highlights that the need for indigenous capabilities in Indian Ocean. Maritime Research Center also promotes the local innovations, regional cooperations, and indigenous technologies. UDA also strengthens the blue economy and sustainable ocean governance by the combining of modern technology with the local knowledge. MRC framework. The MRC Center UDA framework also is a major contribution towards the integrated ocean governance. It combines four key areas: the security, blue economy, environment, and disaster management, as well as the science and technology. The framework is beyond the approach by the cooperating corporations as government, researchers, industries, defense agencies, and coastal communities. It also encourages the use of advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence, underwater sensors, acoustic technologies. By connecting these pillars, the UDA framework that UDA framework supports sustainable ocean, that is sustainable governance, as well as storm maritime security. Then also the best monitoring as well as the management in maritime security. So in last, it is about it is how UDA framework promotes a lot of things, as well as it also shows how MDA has become far more better than UDA. Thank you.
Thank you, Ekta. We now move towards the economic dimensions of the blue economy. For that, our next presenter is J. Catherine, who's the head of research at the Maritime Research Center. She's going to be presenting on blue economy accounting framework.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Catherine. I'm currently heading the research department at Maritime Research Center. So this work on blue accounting is something that we've started recently, and we've made constant progress in developing a framework on how to holistically and comprehensively look at blue accounting. In this process, we've had various mentors, and one of our key advisors in this particular project is Ambassador Anup Mutkal himself. I'm happy to present some of the glimpses of how we're going about it. We cannot go in depth with the 10-minute framework, the period that we've got, but I'll take you through the glimpses of how we are approaching this particular problem. So there are the key elements and capabilities that we're going to be looking at. Blue accounting is underwater domain awareness and MSP and the actual methodology for the blue accounting process itself. So a little bit of background, which is already understandable, is that we have a productive ocean, which is poorly accounted. For at present, we account only we say that the number that is available is that about 4 to 5% of our GDP is contributed from the oceans. This could be a gross underestimation. That is some of these a predominant scholarly debate. So based on that hypothesis, we kind of start a journey by understanding what we have, what we are supposed to ask, what questions we are missing, what questions we are supposed to ask. So starting on that journey, we have basically the three major the portion of this particular world is economy, ecosystem, society, and in addition to that, there's a plus item which is the security, because ocean is an important barrier which kind of protects the national sovereignty. So there are these elements to oceans which needs which cannot be monetized, but they do add value to your economy. So this whole exercise is to understand how to present this in a way that our the stakeholders can 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 make their decisions with more prudence. So looking ahead, the economics gain that we currently assess hides a lot of degradation to the asset base, and the blue accounting makes the ecological conditions and the ecosystem services visible. So that is why it's the blue accounting, and we have avoided the term ocean accounting instead. And moving on, why in India, particularly considering the Indian Ocean, the tropical waters, it has high value and it's a high velocity system. It's very dynamic. The changes are very rapid. There are extremities. These are some of the factors that make this particular part of the world, the Indian Ocean, the tropical waters, unique. And when we create a system for a framework for such a system, it has to be customized accordingly. So the three capabilities that are introduced at the very beginning, the blue accounting, the UDA, and modeling and simulation-based MSP are going to be the key elements and the capabilities that are required to make this tool functional. So in this context, there are a lot of questions that we're asking here now. And basically what we're trying to do is first we are going to account it, we are going to observe and then simulate and make decisions and then monitor and keep updating. So that is going to be our the cycle that we are going to be following. And so UDA is going to provide is the integrated marine intelligence. So you have your Internet of Things data, you have your AIS data, you have your sensor data, you have hydrographic surveys, fisheries data, and various department data. It's not limited to this, but we have like a lot of data that we take into account to make this possible. And altogether, it is the intelligence that's going to be the backbone of the whole process. What MSP is going to be doing, Marine Spatial Planning is going to be doing, is going to make the trade-offs explicit. In different use cases, marine use scenarios, we are going to be evaluating it against what are the this particular sector is creating an asset or a liability, or what kind of the losers and the people who are going to be gaining from the process, which stakeholder is benefiting, etc. So the trade-offs going to become explicit when marine spatial planning, blue accounting is integrated into marine spatial planning. So blue accounting quantifies the value and UDA keeps the value current because your data gets keeping updated, and marine modeling and simulation based MSP tests the alternatives. So in this present framework, this is what we are presenting, which is a 5-pillar system. So you have your natural capital, you have your ocean economy, which is the conventional way of looking at your economic gains and benefits. And then you have the ecosystem services that you're gaining or that you're losing from because of a certain endeavor. And then you have your social and equity pillar, and then the governance pillar. So these are the 5 pillars on which our various terms and factors are going to be evaluated and determined. This could also be looked at in this particular manner. So after determining what are the major pillars, there are these, what is the strategy that we are going to be using is a sectoral analysis strategy. So instead of looking at it in a state-wise manner because we have a federal system and we can actually, there are multiple ways in which we can approach this problem. But what we have picked out and which seems more feasible is a sectoral analysis strategy so that every sector can be analyzed in itself, not just in terms of what is the conventional gains or benefits or what damages it's doing, but more in terms of the 5 pillars that I've already mentioned. So you have different mapping that you can do in sectoral analysis. So a basic formula that we are going to be using is evaluating what is the value addition. So value addition is your market value, your indirect value, the avoided cost. Avoided cost is basically what is if that particular resource, which is the ocean resource, was not available and we were going to be using some other route to achieve the same goal, what is the value that is getting added because the ocean was available for our use? What value addition is happening there? And then strategic value, ecosystem services value. And then what is the value which is getting lost or forgone, which is the environmental degradation, your opportunity cost, your restoration and degradation cost. So in this way, the economic value is not just your revenue, but it also adds value, nature, and the environmental and social impact costs, making this more of a comprehensive, giving a comprehensive picture. So I would now try to take you. So that was the theoretical part. So we have had some work done this year on how to implement it, and because this is the start. We had like a multiple. We had multiple methods that we had decided on taking up for different projects so that we can identify which one is the most efficient one. So one of the approach was to analyze what are the assets and the liabilities that are getting created because of a process, because of any management process or from a particular sector. So for example, in this case study, we have the Vadhavan port. So here, the biofouling management system is going to get set up, and when that gets set up, you are going to be having the revenue is going to get generated, and of course, your ships are going to get efficient. The fuel efficiency is going to increase. So for those who don't know what biofouling is basically when your ship transits in the oceans, and while it's transiting, your hull and the part which is submerged inside the ocean gets the algae and other marine organisms get deposited on it, and it's not just simple deposition; they get really hardwired into the surface of the hull, which increases your drag force and it increases your greenhouse gas emissions because your fuel usage increases, and that makes it the cost of operation increases subsequently. So in that case, what happens is periodically you're supposed to clean it, and that is called biofouling management. And in Vadhavan, when we're trying to set that up, we have to, before doing that, we have to see what are the different liabilities, economic, social, and environmental liabilities, in addition to what are the assets you're going to be creating. And in this particular research, we also found that we had like a lot of questions we started off with. One is, if we were doing it from a conventional economics perspective, the question was going to be, how much money does biofouling management save or generate? But the broader question that we asked was, what economic, ecological, and social values created, and what losses or liabilities are avoided because of biofouling management, and what is the best possible scenario or a pathway, technological, social, and environmental, to execute it. So this was a question that we started off with. Based on the literature review and a few assumptions on the capacity of that particular port, these are some of the results. The major, striking economic impact was that about 4.17 lakh per hour fuel cost was getting expended because of unmanaged biofouling. Similarly, in your environmental impact, the invasive the species that are going to be, because the ship is going to be transiting a whole lot of waters, like different oceans, and the invasive species from one part of the world can migrate to the other one, and it could be a dangerous scenario. In that case, we also have like Tarapur nuclear power plant, and if which is very close to the port that is being planned, so that is in place. So how is that going to get affected if the pipeline, the water pipelines get affected by it gets whether these invasive species somehow migrate, and we have to study how these migration is happening, the wind patterns, etc. So based on that, it might and block some of those pipelines, or in create a whole different scenario with respect to the invasive species damages. So these are some of the environmental impact, and these will have low counting responses. So these are measured, and a list of assets and liabilities were generated based on our study. And when we talk about liability, it's not just, so we compare the liability. So what we basically usually do is we think about how biofouling management has avoided certain liabilities, for example, the fuel cost, etc. But management itself creates liabilities. For example, the the invasive impact, species impact that I just mentioned, that is a liability that gets created. So you have to make a comparison between these two to actually understand what exactly the actual picture of what is going to happen if such a management process is implemented full on. Based on that and the initial equation that I had shown you, the total ocean value generated, this is it gets modified accordingly based on the assets and the liabilities that we are looking at. Each of these value, the terms which can be monetized only where it's defensible, and when the non-monetizable strategic and ecological indicators have to be reported separately. That is one of the disclaimers. And now, how do we combine it with marine spatial planning, which is modeling and simulation based? It's through this. We kind of introduce your spatial, the temporal, and a scenario based approach, where we look at how the same vessel in different parts, in different times of the year, how that is going to have different impact. So it's going to be a function of what vessel, which route you're taking, which time of the year, and what kind of environmental baggages you're carrying, and what kind of management practices is prevalent. So it could be robotics, it could be manual. There are various ways to manage biofouling. So the management process is also going to be a key defining term. And once you have that, you can also do a scenario check about how no intervention, a periodic intervention in the predictive biofouling management, how in different scenarios, a delta TUV could be defined, which is the difference between your baseline and the managed TUV. So once we have these values, it becomes very, it gives you a completely different picture of how you look at the whole sector. So now what we are doing is we are moving from a static account to a living ocean ledger. So to recap, we are observing using UDA, we are accounting using the blue accounting methodology, and we are modeling it and then allocating spaces. So after you model it, the next step is based on the scenario the scenario system. You are allocating which marine spatial planning which sector is going to be allocated with space. And then you're going to monitor and validate accordingly. So the conceptual shift is happening where instead of just reporting what happened and doing a reactive analysis, you're going to be anticipating what could happen. And these are some of the stakeholders who are going to be, definitely getting benefits from this particular system. And so basically, a resilient blue economy is also what we are envisioning. And so finally, how instead of asking how much the ocean produces, the question that we are asking from this project is, what ocean assets sustain that production, and how do we keep them productive, equitable, and resilient? Thank you for this opportunity. I'll end my presentation here.
Thank you, Catherine. Building upon the Blue Economy Accounting Framework, our next presentation takes us into a sector-specific assessment of the blue economy. I now invite Peter Biju, who is a student at St. Stephen's College and also part of the UDA summer internship, to present his research work. Over to you, Peter.
Yeah. Good evening. My name is Peter Bichu. I'm a research intern at MRC working specifically on creating a comprehensive blue economy accounting framework for Maharashtra, for the state of Maharashtra, where we look at 3 particular sectors for Maharashtra's blue economy and try to create an individual framework for each of these. So before we start, sorry, just 1 second. Is my screen visible?
Yes. Just put it on the slideshow, Peter, and then you can proceed.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. So before we start, the first question we need to ask is why is such a framework needed? Firstly, when we look at a traditional measurement of economic value and total value, like a GDP, we try to understand that the GDP or any other traditional measurement doesn't usually show us this whole picture. And there's a lot of factors which often go missed. When we talk about ecosystem services or social costs or the costs of pollution, these are aspects which are really hard to quantify and assess. And traditional measurements often miss these factors. So the question we are trying to answer is not how much value did we produce, but how much ocean value did we produce, preserve, and secure. So, like mentioned in the previous presentation, we build up on the total ocean value added equation, which not only accounts for the market value, but accounts for the indirect and intangible costs, the opportunity costs, the cost of environmental degradation, and restoration costs. So, when we are looking at a linear equation like this, we are trying to keep it simple yet realistic at the same time. And also, we need to understand that there's always a risk of double counting which is there, especially when we try to understand that the sectors often interact with each other through different channels. So we try to account for this risk as well and mitigate it. So the 3 sectors which we're looking at are ports, fisheries, and mangroves. Ports and fisheries are obviously 2 very important and important sectors when we talk about Maharashtra's blue economy. Mangroves isn't strictly speaking an economically value-adding sector, at least not directly, but we have tried to include it to include other aspects like the ecosystem services it offers and other environmental and social aspects. So when we look at the port sector, firstly, ports are a major contributor to Maharashtra's ocean GDP, but trade statistics alone miss the environmental and social impacts. Firstly, obviously, we try to include the economic value added through the cargo throughput and the trade activity which takes place through Maharashtra's ports. We also try to include environmental and social aspects. For example, the construction of the Wadhwan port leads to the displacement of a lot of fisher folk. This is something which we try to account for as well as the environmental costs of anti-fouling coating which is applied on vessels. This is another aspect which we try to account for. Similarly, for the fisheries sector, now fisheries explicitly sustains a lot of coastal livelihoods, but beyond the catch value and the market activity which takes place through this sector, we also try to ascertain and quantify the displacement of fisher folk that takes place due to the resource competition, as well as a really important environmental aspect like overfishing, which affects the sustainability of fish stocks. Obviously, these are factors which are hard to monetize and assess, but we still report it since it's necessary to create an inclusive framework which addresses all these aspects. Finally, when we talk about the mangrove sector, like I mentioned before, mangroves barely register in market transactions, yet we have created a framework structured around its ecosystem services, mainly the storage of blue carbon, the coastal protection from floods, and the nursery habitat services it offers in terms of nourishing of certain fish species, which directly feeds into the fishery sector as well. So this is where we come back to the problem of double counting. What we need to understand is that these three sectors overlap in space and value. So there's obviously a lot of double counting risks. These are a few examples given here. So every sector node is checked against the same boundaries before we actually combine the totals. And one thing we need to make sure of is that over and above just conceptually creating boundaries to avoid these double counting risks, we also need to understand that we need to have the data to back up these boundaries and support these boundaries so that these risks are offsetted. And this is where we come back to the UDA framework and the MSP tool in general, because the accounting framework by itself isn't that much of a useful tool unless connected and cooperated with the planning tool. So the accounting tells you how much ocean value exists and not where it sits on the coast. The spatial planning, based on the modeling and simulation data, tells you exactly where the activity happens and gives you the disaggregated data. Each sector notes values are tied to the specific stretch of course that you come from. But when they become layers inside the MSP tool, it gives planners a tool where they can weigh economic, ecological, and social value before a decision is made and not after. So when we look at the path ahead, firstly, we need to understand that there's a lot of gaps in the research. Firstly, a lot of the values that we built upon often rely on rough estimates built on published scientific papers rather than fresh field data, which is more reliable. Also, we are often forced to look at case studies looking at very specific locations or specific aspects. And again, we often resort to reporting ranges rather than single numbers to increase the confidence. So when we look at the path ahead, we need to understand that this framework that we've created for each of these sectors is a base for creating a similar framework for other sectors of the blue economy like tourism or energy generation. And at the same time, it is important to be able to replicate and build a similar framework for other states as well and for the country as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. We now come to the presentation of the day. And as I make this transition, I have a slightly unusual privilege of moving from the role of an MC to that of a presenter. My research focuses on a concept called the 100 Warriors Initiative, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. In my presentation, I will take you through the 100 Warriors Initiative and how UDA can be, an implementation aid for that. So for the next few minutes, I'm stepping away from the MC desk and I'm going to be joining my fellow interns and presenters. With that, let me share my screen with all of you. Right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nishtha and I head the communications and outreach team at the Maritime Research Center. Parallel to that, I have also done some amount of research on the topic called the 100 Warriors Initiative, implementing the UDA framework. In my presentation today, the major things that I'm going to be covering includes everything about the 100 Warriors Initiative, the major components that comes under the 100 Warriors Initiative, including the coastal warriors, the river warriors, and the water warriors. Third, I'm going to be discussing about the implementation roadmap for the 100 Warriors Initiative through the UDA framework. Apart from that, I will also discuss with you briefly about the major challenges that the coastal, the river warriors, and the water-dependent warriors faces, and the implementation initiative through a three-step process called the policy intervention, technology intervention, the capacity and capability building. Besides that, I will also briefly talk about the role of people, economy, nature triad within the UDA framework for implementing the 100 Warriors Initiative. Right. So why do we need an initiative like a 100 Warriors Initiative? Sorry. It's because the global community is progressing very quickly and the maritime consciousness has gained a lot of significance in the past few years and decades, I would say. Also, many of the coastal and riverine communities are transitioning from traditional maritime practices to the so-called new age opportunities. Also, these communities need to catch up, to the skilling knowledge benchmark of today's world in order to be in the mainstream of the society. Okay, 100 Warriors Initiative explained. I would start by saying, informing that this concept has been crafted and developed by the Maritime Research Center. It was ideated and conceptualized by the internal team members of MRC, all guided by the founder and director of MRC, Dr. Commander Arnab Das. This initiative focuses on strengthening the livelihoods of the coastal, riverine, and water resource dependent communities. Also talking about the main goal of this initiative is to provide these communities with relevant skills and training that will help them better handle challenges like the climate change, unsustainable practices, coastal erosion, economic pressures from overfishing or illegal fishing activities. However, this overall initiative has various stakeholders, including some of the major stakeholders that I can think of right now, and it's available on my slide as well, includes the government machineries, the resource consumers, which include, the beneficiaries of the direct beneficiaries of the 100 Warriors Initiative, such as the coastal warriors, the river warriors, and water warriors, the decision makers, the fisherfolk community, industry, and media. So I am now going to talk a little bit about, the components of the 100 Warriors Initiative. The 100 Warriors Initiative includes the coastal warriors. So the main aim is to improve the livelihoods of the coastal communities through the 100 Warriors Initiative. For the coastal warriors, we want to offer sustainable use of ocean resources for economic development. This initiative fosters a deeper connection between the people and the marine resources and benefits the socio-economic, socio-political, and socio-cultural aspects of the coastal areas and the people belonging to the coastal communities. Second, talking about the river warriors, this project will help the river warriors to ensure they have there's a ecological conservation benefits that is given to the fisherfolk community. Also, it safeguards the delicate river ecosystem and supports biodiversity across the riverine topography of the country, plus, the other countries where this project can be initiated. Talking about the water warriors, we all know that water resources such as extensive groundwater reserves are mainly contributed by the substantial monsoon rainfall. So sustainable practices such as rainwater harvesting and efficient irrigation and technological innovation such as remote sensing and desalination are going to be part of what we are going to train the river warriors with. Also, community engagement and awareness programs are crucial for facilitating a culture of conservation of these resources. Moving on, this initiative draws inspiration from other water conservation practices also. So in this slide, I want to talk about what are the existing water conservation practices that we can adapt into the 100 Warriors Initiative to help one of the major beneficiaries of the 100 Warriors Initiative, which are water resource dependent communities. So in my slide, I say that empowerment plays a central role in this initiative. And nowhere is this more evident than a story of the Jal Saheli, women water stewards in Bundelkhand. So to the right of my screen, you can see, there are a group of women who are standing there, and they were part of something called Jal Sahelis, where these women were trained in technical and practical aspects of water conservation. So they were trained from, they were made to learn about how to repair broken hand pumps to constructing check dams and spreading awareness about water literacy. So that's something that, as part of the awareness campaigns we can do for the 100 Warriors initiative as well. Moving on, there's another concept, which I'm going to be talking about when I present this slide, which is about a kundi. Like kundi in Rajasthan, for example, ancient systems like the kundi, a simple yet indigenous rainwater harvesting method, are being reintroduced. So these systems are designed to collect and store scarce rainfall in the arid zones, and they've offered water security for generations. So these are some of the cases, two of the cases that I can think of, and I can explain in today's webinar about how do we draw inspiration from other water conservation practices for the water resource dependent community only. So here are the major challenges that the warriors face, which I've already spoken about, which are climate change, overfishing, territorial disputes, displacements. Also, we need to understand that these indigenous communities possess sophisticated knowledge system regarding marine ecosystems. So, and they are the custodians of the traditional knowledge, which was passed down from generations to them to promote biodiversity conservation and sustainable livelihoods. So we cannot do much without, working in support, working parallelly with the people from the fisher folk communities, from the coastal communities and the water resource dependent communities. And that is why we say that 100 Warriors initiative incorporates traditional ecological knowledge into modern conservation efforts. Moving on. Also, yeah, I think I'll just move to the next slide. So implementing the 100 Warriors initiative. As I've mentioned at the beginning of my presentation as well, the implementation strategy of 100 Warriors initiative goes through three approaches. The first is policy intervention, second being technology intervention, third being capacity and capability building. The policy intervention is, further includes people, economy, nature, and capacity and capability further includes 2C, to understand, to share, triad, again, something which has been conceptualized by our team internally itself. So talking about the policy intervention, so the steps that are involved in the implementation of the 100 Warriors initiative under the policy intervention includes step number 1, maintaining dialogues with relevant stakeholders, including community members, industry experts, and policymakers. Also, step 2 is based on the initial talks and analysis. The 100 Warriors will collectively come out with a policy briefs suggesting modifications of the existing policies. As part of the third step, it proposes strategies for creating and implementing policies that are both effective and sustainable. And the last step would be EIA formulation that would look at the impact of the environment while also considering the socio-economic factors of the 100 Warriors initiative. Getting into the technology intervention part of it, I think the step 1 would be to identify where technology can be a solution for the 100 Warriors. Step 2 will be to integrate the technology into the existing solution, which is like combining with the coastal communities, people from the riverine communities, working in collaboration with them and teaching them how to integrate the technology that we wish to feel, validate and deploy into the fields, and match it with the existing solutions. Also, the third step includes development of the technology solution. And in the fourth step, it will be about promotion of marine spatial planning schemes for data-driven policy making, something that my colleague Sridhar has talked very extensively about, and Vaibhav also, one of our interns, he also spoke about it in his presentation. So in terms of capacity and capability building in the 100 Warriors initiative, there's a 3-step approach that we are going to follow, which is to see, to understand, and to share. So the 100 Warriors initiative, these candidates will be part of the deployment team under the 2C factor, and they will make sure that all the data is securely shared with the data analytics team. Then comes the next step, which is to understand. these candidates will be part of the data processing team. They will build models that draw important inferences from the data. So then this after this step, the next step is going to be to share. So these are the candidates. These candidates will be part of the development team that will carry out application development, which includes Android app development and web development to disseminate necessary information to the masses. So this is what the implementation cycle is all about. Now, talking about the people economy nature, we integrate the people economy nature triad in the 100 Warriors initiative. This will involve empowering individuals, fostering sustainable economic practices, and prioritizing ecological health. So as part of the people, as we all know that people as community leaders and change makers, they play the main role, they play the pivotal role in mobilizing and engaging local population. We would want to aid a sense of ownership and responsibility towards conservation in the 100 Warriors to empower these communities to take active role in environmental stewardship. Through educational programs, community organizations and advocacy, they will cultivate a collective effort towards ocean and river stewardship. Their grassroots engagement ensures that conservation efforts are inclusive, culturally relevant, and community driven. So that's about the people aspect. Second is the economy aspect. This revolves around recognizing and harnessing the economic benefits of healthy oceans and rivers. For example, clean and well-managed rivers can boost local economies through improved fisheries, tourism, and agriculture. Training programs must include economic impact assessment and sustainable business practices also. Now, talking about the nature aspect, the 100 Warriors will focus, the whole of the heart of the 100 Warriors is all about the nature conservation. So this will, of course, is going to focus on restoring and protecting these natural systems through activities such as water quality testing, pollution control, and habitat restoration. By understanding and promoting the intrinsic value of nature, the Warriors will advocate for policies and practices that prioritize ecological health. It also ensures natural resources are preserved for future generations. So with this, I conclude my presentation. So this is all about the 100 Warriors initiative and the significance of it, the importance of it, etc. Right. Thank you very much. That was my presentation. And with that, we conclude the presentation segment of today's webinar. We now move into what I believe is one of the most interesting and valuable part of today's program, the experts intervention. The research presented today has brought together perspectives on various topics, including marine spatial planning, modeling and simulation, global strategic affairs, blue economy, sector assessment, capacity and capability building, etc. The opportunity to now receive feedback from experts working across these diverse fields will allow our interns to critically examine their research, identify what they can do with their research work going forward, and understand how academic inquiry can connect their work with the real world practices and policy. With that, it is therefore my privilege to welcome our distinguished panel of experts today. It is my privilege to begin this segment with Dr. Ajit Ranade, who is the Dean of Research at the Pune International Center. A little bit introduction about Dr. Ranade. He is a distinguished economist, researcher, and public policy thinker with extensive experience spanning macroeconomics, public policy, economic development, and strategic affairs. His work has consistently brought together rigorous research with a strong understanding of larger economic and policy environment in which national priorities are set and shaped. Dr. Ranade, we are honored to have you with us today. We invite you to share your comments and feedback with us. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nishna. Thank you for the kind introduction. And let me begin by congratulating all the presenters today, starting with Vaibhav, Sridhar, Calistine, Ekta Sareen, Catherine, Peter Biju, and of course yourself, Nishna. And presenting a lot of work in a short span of 10 minutes is difficult and somewhat unfair. but you are all able to give me some sense. I'm sure everybody else also got some sense of the kind of work that's going on. It's very intense and very deep, and I think it'll need much longer than 10 minutes to convey what you're doing. And it also, I must commend, of course, Commander Das, Dr. Das, who has been one of the what you call 100 warriors. He's the original warrior in terms of leading the trying to spread this awareness, spread understanding and sensitivity about the importance of this field, the great significance, and so on. Can I just take half a minute break? I just have to I'll take half a minute.
Neeraj ji, thank you for joining us. I couldn't introduce in the beginning. Really appreciate you joining us.
Well, thank you. It's great to see everybody. Is that Ambassador Mudgal? How are you? Nice to meet you.
Good. Thank you so much. And
Yes, we heard a lot about you. Jenna, how are you?
Doing very well, thank you.
Yes. Great job, Commander Das.
Sorry,
I think he's right about the 100
can I
years.
just continue? Sorry. Can I just continue, Commander Das?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Certainly, sir. Please.
So sorry for that little break, which was unavoidable. So I want to, as I said, commend all the presenters, and this is very comprehensive. It from one in the beginning, it started with technology and simulation tools, which were of course very advanced. I mean, from my understanding, I'm also impressed with the fact that they're all St. Stephen's College students. I know they are doing probably arts and science, but the way it was presented, it sort of revealed some kind of engineering understanding also, engineering and technology understanding, which is not something you normally expect from St. Stephen's College student. But so congratulations on that. I want to just give you a few points, just for food for thought. Really, I mean, I know a lot has been covered, so I won't go into all the material again. But I was just saying that you remember the IPI pipeline proposal. There was an Iran-Pakistan-India pipeline proposal for natural gas long time ago, maybe 20 years ago. That was the time when such possibilities could be contemplated. And one of the reasons, I mean, of course, it did not materialize. Now we have recently reformulated it as IMEC, India Middle East Corridor. And perhaps we'll have to see how it, materializes or crystallizes. I mention it because one of the things that was a stumbling block is that this pipeline would be great for the energy security of both India and Pakistan. And it was providing an outlet for gas, which was found in the gas fields of Iran and perhaps in that region. But one of the stumbling blocks, and there were many, was who will assure the security of the pipeline. So I was reminded about that when you talked about undersea cables. So it's not very well appreciated. It's only in the recent attacks on the pipelines and the recent situation in West Asia that the world got awakened. But here is some, while the Iran pipeline was about energy security, but this is actually much more significant because it's all about the interconnected internet world. Everything we do is so highly digital that even a simple thing like just a payment or a banking transaction or something to do with e-governance or education or even entertainment, everything is very closely connected with being in an interconnected world. And the security of the subsea cables, undersea cables, is something that has come out, in your study. So I just want to highlight that. The other thing I wanted to highlight again, I'm just giving some of my top of mind thoughts. The Earth probably spends thousands and millions of years having good, very rich aquifers. So this is underground water, or what is called groundwater. We of course depend on water supply for the monsoon rains, the melting glacier, the rivers, and then it's a cycle. But when we go deep into the groundwater, we are actually tapping into water resources which have taken millions, thousands or probably tens of thousands of years to build. But we just take it out in 1 minute, and it's in a Bisleri bottle. And so when you look at the cost-benefit analysis, I was reminded of that. So when you talk about the ocean resources and you do the accounting, this is something we need to highlight. I don't know how it can be brought into GDP calculation when you are actually tapping into an asset which takes a million years to build, but is degraded instantly. Third point I wanted to make, and by the way, the green accounting framework is now also being explored, not just for ocean resources, but also forest, land resources, and overall ecology, including biodiversity above land. Third thought I want to share is about microplastics in the ocean. This was again not discussed maybe 20 years ago. Now it is a major issue. It's become a and these are people think of microplastics. I know they say there are the islands of microplastics or waste the size of Texas, in the oceans. But this is not a visible island. This is not a visible mass. It's actually not visible to the naked eye, but it is entering the food chain, the entire eco chain. And again, your UDA under undersea domain awareness and your analysis is going to throw up these kind of things, which is actually a global issue now. It's not only confined to any one nation. Fourth point I want to share is that I'm very happy that you had two presentations which are somewhat relevant to local conditions. That is the state of Maharashtra. The one about Vadhavan, the Vadhavan port, which is coming up. It's a significant initiative. It is going to supposedly lead to a lot of investment and support many livelihoods. But I'm happy that you're highlighting that we have to be examined in a proper cost-benefit framework, because the benefits are being highlighted, but the costs are not so well known. And the cost versus benefit framework usually just pits the environmentalists against the policymakers or the finance guys. And that's not a proper formulation, because there is a midpoint somewhere, a golden middle. So your framework I found it to be much more, what should I say, rational. And I hope you'll be able to push it more. So finally, I just want to say that this has been educational for me. There's a lot of technical subjects, technical topics and acronyms, which I'm not that familiar. I think for Commander Das and your team, you live, eat, sleep, breathe with these things. So you have to make some allowance for ignorant people like me, because it takes some time to understand. But it's been a very educational experience, and I thank you for all the hard work, and I congratulate you. I must also thank you for not making me putting me in the shoes of a jury, because it would have been very difficult. There are 7 different presentations, and all of them were quality work. So I congratulate all the speakers, and I wish all the students best wishes in your careers. And I, of course, look forward to connecting with Commander Das and your colleagues very soon later this month. Thank you. I will need to leave because I have another meeting to attend, but thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Dr. Ranade. Thank you so much. We'll connect again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ranade. Our next expert is Ms. Jenna Lindeke Heavenrich, who's a lead analyst and director at YCAPS Tokyo. YCAPS is Yokosuka Council on Asia Pacific Studies. Her work brings an important international and Asia Pacific perspective to discussion surrounding maritime affairs, regional dynamics, and strategic issues. Ms. Jenna, we are delighted to have you with us today. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Nisha, and to the rest of the team. What an excellent group of presentations. I also will admit that marine science is not my area, and so I learned a great deal from all of you. Where I work most is in the sort of intersections of policy and diplomacy and development, and at times security, in specifically the Pacific Island nations, which is many of these small island states, or as they like to be called, the big ocean states. So I was really impressed and was thinking on how all of this work you've been doing could be transferred to spaces like these, who have similar challenges. They're facing climate change, increasingly intense and frequent storms, warming seas, threats to fishing, as well as these warm tropical seas to which many of the tools aren't really suited, like you were saying. there's this challenge of balancing livelihoods and just putting food on the table with larger scale economic things such as commercial fishing. There's marine conservation, balancing with even extractives like deep sea mining are being explored. There's security concerns. There's connectivity with long undersea cables, which are some countries have only a few connecting them to the rest of us, as well as preserving cultural traditions that don't just end at the land. However, one thing that's quite different in these places from India is they are very small. There's very small governments, very small expertise pools, and very small funding. For example, one of the partner countries I've worked with is Palau, and I believe they have something like 18,000 citizens who may or may not be on the island. So if you compare that to even your university, you may see how many ocean scientists may come out of one country. So one of the things I wonder is these blended UDA frameworks and technological tools for monitoring and planning and modeling, I think could be extremely useful to these small countries who have huge economic zones as compared to their small land and small population. So I think one thing that I can encourage all of the presenters to consider is how could these tools and frameworks that you've all been creating, could they transfer to partner states that are much smaller than India, what kind of expertise is needed, what kind of technology is needed, what kind of funding is needed, and how could that work out? So just a consideration to think about how could be shared once it's piloted here in Pune and in India. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jenna, for your kind remarks and for your intervention. We now invite Mr. Neeraj Kinvasara, who's the Executive Director at the World Trade Center, Pune. Given the growing importance of blue economy and intersection between research, industry, trade, and economic development, his perspectives adds an important dimensions to today's discussion. Over to you, Mr. Neeraj.
Thank you, Nishita. Commander does amazing job, getting all of these young folks, and I think I'm amazed at the work you're doing in India with cutting edge solutions, and I think this group is very advanced. And blue economy, it started with SDG 6 and SDG 14, life below water, which you're kind of aware of it, but we're doing a call to action with it now. So it's literally now the focus, as there was Europe going into carbon tax, all of the manufacturing supply chains, that's in a little advanced stage as far as sustainability and the deployment of UN SDG 2030 is. But specifically, life below water has come into focus, and we are collaborating with about 22 World Trade Centers right now and UNDP. And what we've done is we've done a competition where 10 unique solutions from around the world will be selected. And in about 4 months' time in Rome, Italy, we are announcing the prize. And the prize is complete handholding, offering funding pathways, giving them projects, and taking that forward, taking innovation forward for life below water. So the point being, the focus is now coming, right? The commercialization focus is coming. So there are concepts now like blue carbon credits, blue credits, right, and blue funding, which we used to call green funding, and all of these things are coming. And what I liked about today was we've taken such an advanced role already in some of these solutions. So thank you for that. A couple of things I did note about each of the presenters. Everyone did a fantastic job. I think marine spatial planning will definitely help for data aggregation for smarter decisions. Building the blue sun and UDA as a blue MRI. I think these two talk about global governance, which is very important, and multilateral agencies coming together for global cooperation and keeping in mind, not just security, but also doing it sustainably, right? So that was a very key point I took. I think tropical versus temperate waters. I think you were the first one to educate me, Commander, about how our conditions are different than the West, right? And I echo that. There was a solution from Norway that we were very, very gungo about. We bought that to India, and guess what? It didn't work in India with the water conditions. So I can completely understand what you're saying, and I think this is a very, very interesting perspective. Blue accounting, I would say, is super important. If you can measure and account for data, then you can improvise and plan for it, right? And it's such a vast territory. How do we put sensors? How do we account for it, and how do we plan for it? So I think this is also going to be a very, very important service, and I'm glad that our state of Maharashtra is already looking at blue economy accounting framework for Maharashtra with our coastlines. 100 Warrior Initiative, I think, see huge applications for it in Africa, developing nations. I think Jenna was saying, how do we take these into smaller countries and give them those kind of solutions? So those were my initial comments. I really enjoyed, and I think all of you did a terrific job, presenting these complex solutions, which are early days, for blue economy. So I think, security is one. I think trade routes, how do we map them so we don't disturb the marine? It's just such a complex thing, but I'm glad that solutions are coming out, and we're going into next steps. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Neera, for sharing your comments and feedback with all of us. Our next expert is Mr. Aditya Sinha, who is the Executive Director at Center for Development of Advanced Computing, CDAC in Mumbai. So over to you, Mr. Aditya.
Thank you, Nishta, and very good evening to all of you. Thank you, Commander Das, for inviting me for such the esteemed expert panels. Okay, to participate into this discussions and listen to the researchers on the various domains. I come from CDAC, Center for Development of Advanced Computing, coming under the Ministry of Electronics and IT, and I essentially look things in perspective of the technology. We have we develop supercomputers. You are aware of that. We work on the quantum side. We are helping in the AI to develop applications or the carrying out the missions on the AI side. National identity is one other area on which we work basically, and these are some of the major areas on which our interventions, technological interventions are there. Recently, I had a chance to participate into the maritime activities, and I become this CEO of Maritime Research Center of Excellence, which is a joint initiatives of the Ministry of Port, Shipping and Waterways and the CDAC. Okay. Essentially, we signed the MOU, and we wanted to look into this, dedicate our activities towards the digital technology innovations implementation hub, supporting the digital transformation of ports, shipping, and the allied maritime activities. And the alignment is done through some of the documents which Ministry of Port Shipping has created. It's called Maritime India Vision 2030 and Amrit Kal Vision 2047. So we work with the various domains together with the ministries and the ports, and all those activities. We are a little aware of that what you have talked today. I was very impressed with the kind of from the diverse topic has been picked up by the research groups and research themes, and they have gone beyond this the conventional interpretation of the UDA. Okay, the presentation, if I can, I have heard clearly, and then I heard understood it properly. This collectively connect this UDA with maritime spatial planning, modeling and simulations, geopolitics, the blue economy, very important, capacity development and social impact. These were the diverse areas on which things have been talked about. and the kind of researchers who are working on these kind of things from a technology perspective to the liberal arts people, that makes it more diverse. This is important. This is very, very important because maritime challenges are inherently multidisciplinary and cannot be addressed through only technology. It has to have everything into place. So going forward, I would encourage all those researchers, all the studies what they have done, to move to a step further from conceptual analysis towards evidence-based, measurable and implementable research. Each paper should clearly articulate, maybe because 8 minutes you can't present all the things. I am very hopeful that it will be there, that each paper should have a problem solving addressed, research question, methodology, data sources, very, very important, because the first presenter have already talked about the fragmented data sources are very difficult to get all the data for the research. Limitations, who all are the stakeholders, what kind of technology requirements are there, what are the policy implications would be required, and of course important aspect is the implementation pathway. The ultimate test for all those kind of things discussed what we had should be whether the research can contribute to a policy decision or technology demonstrations, or it can have a even if you can create or can identify data sets or create a digital platform or national capability roadmap, that is very much helpful for the maritime sector. So with this perspective, I would congratulate all the people, that all the researchers who have presented, and looking forward to connect on each of them to see what I can contribute in their studies, how we can take it further, and as a part of the maritime initiatives. So I'm always be available for that purpose. And thank you once again for giving me the opportunity to participate in this kind of discussions. Looking forward for the many more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Aditya Sinha, for your kind remarks and your thoughtful insights. With this, I would like to invite Captain Yogendra Prakash Sharma. He's currently appointed at the United Services Institution of India, USI, as a senior research fellow. His areas of research interest includes maritime security, enhancing maritime consciousness, international maritime law, maritime piracy, and humanitarian studies. Over to you, Mr. Captain YP Sharma.
Thank you, Nishta, for the introduction. First of all, I'll thank Commander Arnav Das. Probably I know him for so many years. I never knew so much is hidden behind his the great work which he is doing for past over a decade. So congratulations to Arnav. Especially, I was impressed with the 100 Warriors initiative. Probably I'll connect with you separately to learn. I'm curious to learn a little more about the 100 Warrior initiative. So I would say, as all the experts have already congratulated, I would say as it is, the phrase says that for a very long time, India has been sea blind. So when we talk about underwater domain awareness, I would say there is very little awareness about the maritime domain awareness. So when there is so much less information about maritime domain awareness, I would say it was a tough task on all these students to go further into the subset of maritime domain awareness and talk about the underwater domain awareness. I'll just take about 30 seconds for each group of the presenters. I think each subject was dealt by two of the presenters. Coming first to Vaibhav and Sridhar, they spoke about the marine spatial planning. Just a little add on what Dr. Ajit Ranade said, that how important are the undersea infrastructure. He said that whatever we do, payments and everything, in addition to whatever he said, I said every telephone call which we make out of India goes through undersea cables. Probably when I ask most of the people, they say it is through satellite. I would say none of our calls go by satellite. Each and every call, whether it is to Gulf countries, US, or anywhere in the world, everything travels through undersea cables. So that gives a relation how important are the undersea cables. Now, when Vaibhav said that marine spatial planning does not come under a particular ministry, I would say that is for obvious reasons. Why? Because when you have covered the marine spatial planning, I don't think it is possible for
YP, please unmute yourself. You got muted. YP, please unmute yourself.
Yeah. So what I was saying when Vaibhav said that marine spatial planning is not covered by a particular ministry, I would say it will be humanly impossible for a particular ministry to cover everything. Why? Because every ministry somehow in one or other aspect is related to marine spatial planning. And I would say at times it is difficult to separate economic growth and human activities. Why? Because it is commonly said, Arnab, you'll remember when we go out of Mumbai harbor, we keep wondering why these all fishing boats come only in the marine channel where the ships are passing. So we used to say the fishermen will fish where the fish is. Like you can't tell them to go somewhere else and fish where there is no fish. So at times the marine spatial planning has got a lot of challenge to segregate or plan how the tourism, the development, and the human activities will further progress. I would say we did give a lot of examples on how the marine spatial planning initiatives, they have not yielded the expected fruit. As Neeraj sir also said, what the technology we borrowed from Norway for, I would say for Puducherry and Lakshadweep Island, it didn't work in 2021, but in 21 and 23. But I'm happy to say that the same thing has been now, I would say, initiated in Odisha in April 2026. And I think they have adapted the technology to Indian needs. And as far as my knowledge goes, it is probably going in the right direction in Odisha, the marine planning, the special marine spatial planning system which has been put up in Odisha. Okay, coming to Ekta and Calistine, I would say, as I've already said, the UDA domain is very difficult as it is. The marine domain awareness itself is difficult to achieve. Forget the UDA. Just to give a small example, how difficult it is for marine domain awareness only. There was a ship in 2011 called motor vessel Pawit. It was abandoned somewhere near Oman in 2011. And after a few months, just suddenly on one fine day morning, people in Juhu, Mumbai, they were amazed to see that MB Pawit right on Juhu beach. Nobody noticed it. A 1,000-ton ship suddenly was found in Juhu beach, and nobody could notice. So people kept saying, "Where was Navy? Where was Coast Guard?" So I was just telling them, just come to VT station in Mumbai. You'll find it difficult to track a particular individual. It is as difficult. So I would say when we talk about the underwater domain awareness, I would say I don't know how many, but it is multiple times even more difficult task for us to know more about the underwater domain awareness. Like we have Hubble's telescope, which recently they have seen or ventured up to trillions of, I would say some trillion light years away. They've said, okay, the extent of universe is there, but we have not been able to still make an equipment or a sonar or something which can track or clearly see maybe more than 100 meters in water. So I would say it's completely still, most of the underwater domain is still obscure. Coming to Catherine and Peter, I would say, as I've already said, the Blue Economy Accounting Framework, probably when we have implemented this marine spatial planning in Odisha, I would say a large part of it has been taken into care, and hopefully we see better results. And as I've already said, I'll connect with you, Arnab, to know a little more about the 100 Warriors program. And I would say, as Neeraj sir also said, it is very difficult to I would say, put across your views and point in those 8 minutes. So in that area, my recommendation will be, as it is the UDA domain is too vast, if we can, instead of covering a vast content, if we can focus on, I would say, less content and go much deeper into detail, so that we can come out with some workable solution for our fishermen, for our working communities across the ocean. So overall, I would say a great effort from Arnab and your team, and from my side, I would say it's a kudos to all of you, Arnab and your team, for coming out with that initiative of 100 warriors. Overall, it's been a great effort. As it is, there has been a sea blindness to the marine domain, and you have focused, gone step further, going into underwater domain awareness. I would say I would say I'll congratulate you and your team for doing this great work in I would say probing into the underwater domain. And though even I have studied a lot about underwater domain awareness, even I was few words and anecdotes which were given, even I was probably have noted down. Even I have to go back and check what they were exactly. So thank you everybody.
Thank you very much, Captain YP Sharma, for your kind remarks. Now, as we come towards the conclusion of today's program, I would like to take a moment to reflect on what this internship journey represents. An internship is often described as an opportunity to learn, but programs like such are equally about learning how to ask better questions, engage with diverse perspectives, conduct rigorous research, and communicate ideas that have relevance beyond the academic scope. I would also like to thank mentors, researchers, colleagues, and everyone at MRC. To deliver the concluding remarks, it is now my privilege to invite Ambassador Anup Kumar Mudgal, IFS retired, former Indian diplomat, to come on stage and share his remarks with all of us. With his distinguished expertise in the Indian diplomacy, international relations, and global affairs, Ambassador Mudgal brings a valuable perspective to the broader geopolitical and strategic dimensions of the UDA framework. Over to you, Ambassador Mudgal.
Thank you, Nishtha. Again, thanks, Arnab, for calling me to listen to these wonderful presentations. You know, I have been dealing with blue economy for almost, something about 12 years now. And I have been associated with what MRC's so I have through this journey of MRC scholars and experts. So obviously, this is an advantage because I'm familiar with the issues which these are presenting and discussing. But I also have a disadvantage of that, because sometimes start and where to end. And that dilemma I'm facing even today. Now, how do I start kind of summarizing or making sense out of what we have done today? Yes, all speakers have given their presentations. We have heard experts. Arnab, in fact, when I look at maybe last few weeks news, what did I notice? And took me our work on underwater domain awareness. You know, we are all talking about this conflict. He's talking about how geopolitics is going to be the future challenges, what will be the pecking order once this ends. But there was an important news which probably we didn't notice. That news was, because those ships are stuck in Hormuz for so long, which is very unusual, it can cause a massive problem of invasive species, because it will give time for the biofouling, which you are working on the biofouling. Biofouling species of the Persian Gulf, once these ships are allowed to travel, they will carry those species all over the world, and many of those species would pose a threat of invasive species, which because and they identified India as one of the major potential victims of such an invasive because our climatic conditions are very similar, but our species composition is not identical. Now, just imagine if we get those invasive species on our coastline, and they will come in millions, and our own biodiversity will not be prepared for dealing with that situation. And suddenly, the other news, which in fact, I was reading a book, it's called Unsettled. Now, Unsettled, this whole book is basically questioning the whole idea of global warming as a result of human activity. Yes, I know there is a larger consensus globally about the contribution of human activity to global warming, but then there are books which are challenging that understanding and that conclusion. Yes. Then I read another news which says there is no harm going for seabed mining. We can probably be more aggressive in seabed mining. And we all know, especially when you talk about UDA, we all know the risk of going for seabed mining unprepared, without understanding the whole consequences. Then I read another news recently. It says AMOC current is slowing down. Now, we have discussed that earlier also. Now, AMOC slowing down is a very, very serious environmental issue. And it can have a systemic implication for the entire global environmental system, particularly for India, for example. So one of your presenters mentioned about monsoon and its implications for understanding the underwater domain awareness. Now, AMOC is an underwater phenomenon and is a huge underwater phenomenon. Then I was wondering, if we have to answer these questions, I'm not talking of all the questions over the history, but last few weeks, where do we have the answers? The answers are underwater. Answers are underwater unless we have a proper and thorough understanding of the underwater domain awareness. We will always face such doubts, and we shall not be able to answer those questions. And unless the answer is convincing, the doubt will become stronger. So that is where the importance of underwater domain awareness. Now, for example, coming to today's presentations, I'm very happy that for the first time, I think the whole group was from humanities. Around, again, about 3-4 years ago, in fact, I was part of a program which was organized by Association of Indian Universities, where we had some 5-6 sessions with central universities all over India. Some 65 odd universities participated at the highest level of vice chancellors and registrars. The main problem, because what we were trying to do was that how to integrate the SDG with the university curriculum. See, our idea was unless every member of the society understands the importance of sustainability, we shall not be able to achieve it. there was a time when, in fact, in one of the presentations, I think it was in Fiji, I said, technology brought the crisis and the technology will solve it. This is my statement. And, I would want to revisit the statement, was I entirely right? When you look in a shallow manner, yes, the technology resulting into industrial revolution and then exploitation of the natural resources brought this crisis. And I thought, now with the new technologies, we will be able to solve this issue. When I revisit my statement, I think, let me expand it. Not the technology. We as people, technology is only a tool. But we as a people brought the crisis, and we as a people probably might solve it now. Technology is only a tool. And if we keep the discourse limited to science and technology alone, I'm sure we would not be able to find a solution. The very large chunk of the stakeholdership is outside the science and technology. This would be the space of economics. This would be the space of politics. This would be the space of social sciences. This will be the space of anthropology. This will be the space of a lot of other things. So unless we bring this discourse to the wider population, it won't work. And when we were doing these conferences with the central universities, most of the conversation gave me the impression that the whole discourse was becoming tech versus the rest. That is why this whole unsettled book, because they think it's the technology or the tech people or the science people who are bringing forward the consequences or the risk of lack of sustainability. The others, because it's a technical issue, they are not able to associate themselves with the science, and as a result don't feel the same risk as the technology people now feel, maybe the biologists or environmentalists. Therefore, taking the discourse to the area beyond technology is absolutely essential. And you remember I mentioned it in one of our earlier conversations. Take it to the ordinary people. Don't limit it to pure technology centric discourse. I'm sure now these presenters today have understood the importance of sustainability much deeper than in an ordinary manner, probably if they were history students or political science or economics or anthropology, as I said, maybe they would not be able to appreciate the magnitude of risk if we do not take care of sustainability. When they go back to their colleges, I'm sure they would be able to talk to their own counterparts in non-tech area and tell them, look, it's a serious threat. So before they write these books like Unsettled, they think, right? They simply don't write because they have not been able to understand the whole thing. Now, coming to the presentations today, I will sequence that like blue economy, then the conflicts, and the MSP. For me, this is the sequence. Why do we go to any place, land, or see resource, and we want to take advantage? That is what we did with the land. That is what we want to, and we want to do. Now, one, look at essential aspect of humanity, be it food, be it energy, be it and I under
Ambassador Mutkul, I'm so sorry to cut you in between, but we're not able to hear. I think there's some connectivity.
Resource exploitation. The primary cause of conflict because those so that causes when it comes to this sector conflict builds and then now my basically force if one of their 40 years then a reach it is and is it okay? Can we hear can should I reboot now? No, what's wrong? Should I try again?
Now you're okay, sir. Now you're okay. You can switch off your
where
audio problem.
Where I stopped being audible. So, coming to, I was talking about the resources, and when there is competition for resources, it can cause conflict. And when it comes to the oceans, oceans are a resource in themselves, and in many other ways, ocean is an enabler for land-based resources. And history is replete with examples where the oceans have played a central role in geopolitical conflicts, including India's own colonization was through the ocean route. Yes, and the future, because that was when the technology was not so advanced. But today with the advanced technology, ocean will become a major cause for conflict. Now the question is, how do we avoid it? How do we avoid this conflict? Conflict mitigation is what the MSP can achieve. If we could plan the marine spaces wisely, I'm sure we can not only avoid intersectoral or interstate conflicts, but we can also avoid and mitigate the conflict with the nature, in fact. If you ask me, of course, I'm worried about intersectoral and interstate conflicts, but I'm very worried about the conflict with the nature. Because the revenge of the nature is always very, very severe, and we do not have the tools to deal with them. And again, go back into the history. A large number of civilizations were not destroyed because of wars, but they were destroyed because of climate change and environmental degradation. Right? So I think MSP, limiting ourselves to the ocean spaces, MSP is a tool which can help us mitigate such conflicts. And for that, what? For that, we have to have the awareness. Awareness means what? We need to understand the language of the ocean. I have been saying that for many of earlier conversations. We must understand the physics of the ocean, chemistry of the ocean, biology of the ocean, history of the ocean, climatology of the ocean. Now, unless, and it's a hugely data dominant, it's a heavy data. And that is why, because when we heard this conversation, underwater domain awareness, we had very little knowledge because we did not have the technology to understand the ocean's language. But today, thankfully, we are developing those technologies that can help us understand the language of the ocean. In most of those presentations, you mentioned about modeling and simulation. Now, modeling and simulation, even though we have the technologies, but still the magnitude of data and space is so large, we cannot physically manage every inch of the ocean. Then how do we do it? The only pathway available to us is modeling and simulation. Because there are spaces in the ocean which have very similar overall situation in terms of ecological factors and in terms of the biological factors and in terms of the economic factors. Now, if those spaces have identical circumstances, can one model apply to the rest or not? And that validation, if you do the validation, then I'm sure we can develop those models where one model with minor variation could be applicable in hundreds of different places. And as we play with these models will become wiser with time. And when they become wiser with time, they would be able to manage minor spatial fluctuations in terms of the local environmental variation. Now, I think this is what today's presentations were all about. And I'm sure, as I always say, I'm sure we would convert very soon this knowledge into solutions. Because I said, the larger society is not interested in the technical details. Larger society has problems and they are seeking solutions. We can't talk too much of academics to them because that's not their primary goal. They say, I want my job today. I want my food this evening, which means there are problems. Can we convert our knowledge into solutions? I think the success would be measured by that transition from knowledge to solutions. And I'm sure our young scholars, because when I say knowledge to solutions, basically I mean them. I'm sure whatever solution you find now, it may not be so relevant to my generation because we have lived a life. It will be relevant to their generation. They are the future. And the solutions have to address the future needs of society, humanity. And I congratulate every one of you. You have done a wonderful job. You continue to do a wonderful job. And I hope, I wish that very soon we will be able to go to people and tell them, look, we are not only bringing knowledge to you, but we are bringing a solution to your problem. With these words, I end. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, sir. As always, your guidance is extremely important for all of us. And as you said, we have tried to bring a spectrum of different types of work which will contribute to what you said, the solutions. So, I mean, the MSP tool can be deployed across, I mean, as Jane said, Pacific Islands. It can go to Africa, as Neeraj says, it can go to any place. And we pick up local data, we field validate in the local condition. And then we have a licensing model where every problem, local problem can be addressed. And it will be addressed in a comprehensive manner where multiple dimensions. I mean, like through Neeraj, I met a gentleman from Sri Lanka, and he said somebody came and solved our port problem and created a fisheries problem, and somebody came and solved one problem and created another problem. And that's what the MSP will do, as you rightly said, sir, that MSP is a comprehensive tool which will kind of bring so many different dimensions together. And obviously, whatever those give and takes that need to be done or the trade-offs need to be done will be done on the platform, and the decision makers can prioritize based on that. And then the policy and the tech interventions will be implemented on the ground, which will be far more customized, far more optimized to the local conditions. And also to, I mean, when I say local condition, it also talks about the socio-economic dimension. I mean, that's what Ekta's presentation was talking about, the developed world versus the global south. So, I mean, it's not just the tropical versus the temperate, it is also about the developed world versus the global south, also strategic security versus greater public good. So we are trying to, and what Calistine tried to talk about, unless we have the larger sense of how it is going to impact the global order, we will probably not be able to take it forward. I think I'll not take more time. Thank you so much, sir. And thank you, Neeraj. Thank you, Jane. YP, thank you so much. And we will continue to engage with all of you. And we would also hope to get support so that we can reach the ground, reach the people, reach the market. Neeraj, you want to say something?
No, thank you, Kamana Das. I really enjoyed the presentation, and thank you for putting this together. Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Jane, anything you would like to say?
Thank you very much for including myself and my colleague Leaf in this great discussion. We're grateful to be invited.
Thank you. YP, would you like to say something? Yeah, I think we are done. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. And thank you so much to all the presenters and Nishta, great job. And Shreya also from behind the screens, managing the whole tech platform. Thank you so much.
Take care, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.